Tammy Warren of Tarina Nadura, Sam Alcoff, Tamery Astudio, John Hamilton. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
The sun's shining, birds are singing, and all feels right in the world.
Until the season changes and suddenly everything seems darker, less lively, and you lose your motivation to get out of bed.
If you struggle with depression, you're not alone. In fact, 1 in 5 people experience some form of depression, and no matter the time of year, it may affect your behavioral or physical ability to live a happy life.
At the American Psychiatric Association Foundation, we understand what you're going through, and we're here to help. Our vision is to build a mentally healthy nation for all, because we want you to live your best life and be your best you all year round. We work every day to eliminate stigma, combat mental illness and substance use disorders, and advance mental wellness.
If you or someone you love needs help, you are not alone. Please visit mentallyhealthynation.org to learn more.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
Uh-oh, Brad's buzzed.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he's starting with the woots. And now a speech.
I just want to say that friendship is about heart and brain. Who's with me?
Good thing is, he knows when he's buzzed.
And my brain is saying, when it's time to go home, somebody call me a ride.
Love that guy.
Me too.
Know your buzzed warning signs? Call for a ride when it's time to go home. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
There's one word for the House Republican plan, and it's default, because that's what it is. This idea of prioritizing payments is just default by another name. And so hopefully House Republicans move off this proposal, because it would be a disaster for the American economy, and it would lead the United States into default, which we cannot risk.
Gets us stirred up. That's got to mean something to all of us. Hello, this is L. Nathan Hare. Welcome to our broadcast, focused on providing insight into events shaping our national and regional world and the facts behind those events and policies that are shaping our world for today and for tomorrow. Join us weekly on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. following Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Program. And of course, you know our program is live, so you can call and you can join our discussion. I hope that you will. Our number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. We're normally here with Norma Carter, who is our in-studio audience of one, but he's out there making money right now, so we're not going to see him today. But we do have our citizen of the 21st century who understands how to do all of this IT stuff that allows us to live stream the program, Willie H. Welcome, Willie.
Welcome. Good morning, everybody. Beautiful day in Buffalo. God bless you. You guys can call in 716-878-5104.
So we're going to talk about something that we began a discussion on. We had a listener called in and talked about the idea of preemption. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means. I'm not sure that everybody understands that concept and what its significance is in terms of how it's being applied under law in the United States. Before we get there, I just want to make sure on that soundbite that all of us register in our minds.
What, that was the current soundbite? That was correct?
That was right. That was that soundbite. That wasn't the one that was introducing this subject.
Right.
But it's an important thing for us to have in our head, which is that if the United States does not pay every one of its bills on time, I don't know if you feel me when I say that, this is the United States of America.
Right.
This is not somebody else. This is the United States of America. The brand of the United States is, if the United States borrows money from you, they pay you back on time, pay all the interest every single time.
Wow.
They don't pay it 5 days later, not like you pay your gas bill. They don't pay it, when they get around to it. They don't pay it when their cash flow is correct. They pay every single bill that the United States has to whoever they owe that bill to, and they pay it on time every single time with interest every single time. Because of that, everybody on earth who wants to loan people money so they can earn the interest off of the money that they loan, they want to loan money to the United States because they know they're going to get paid. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you loan somebody some money, remember, you're trusting that the person who you gave the money to is going to give you the money back. Right. Even if they don't give you the interest back, you at least want your principal back, right? Mm-hmm. So you really want to be sure when you loan money that you're going to get your money back. Well, they loan money to the United States because they are absolutely certain that the United States will pay them the money back with interest on time, every single time. Right. The day we stop doing that, this entire house of cards is going to fall apart. And it doesn't just fall apart for the United States. Think about it, if you're a foreign country, you don't want to risk your principal. You want to grow the liquid cash that you have. You want to grow it, but you don't want to risk it. So you don't want to put the money into, Papa John's, brand new square pizza box. It may be a good idea, but it may not grow well enough to be able to pay you back the money that you loaned them to start that company. Mm-hmm. But you'd loan that money to the U.S. Treasury because they're going to pay you 3.5%, 4%, 5%, whatever the interest rates are now. They're going to pay you that money for whatever period that they're borrowing the money for. They're going to pay you that money and pay you back the principal every single time without fail. Mm-hmm. So you know that you can trust that I'm going to grow my liquid assets by 3 or 4 or 5% every year without having to risk my money being in a stock portfolio where the business may go belly up. Mm-hmm. That's what that's all about. If you take that away, now countries are leery. And not only are they leery about selling money to the United States, they're also leery about their own budgets because their budgets are based on getting that interest revenue from whoever they lend money to. And so it creates this domino effect that affects economies all across the world. It works right now because the United States is such a consistent, every single time, on-time, reliable borrower. That's why it works. If the United States ceases to be that, it really is going to change everything. Interest rates are going to go up. Who sells money to who is going to change dramatically. People's budgets are going to be compromised. This is a tremendous a threat, to the world economic order, the world economic system, or the finance system of the world. So it's incredibly important that people understand that that's what's in play. So don't think of it as, well, this is just going to punish the people that are low-income people that are getting, services from the government. That's not who's going to be affected by this. It's the United States' ability to borrow money at a competitive interest rate. It's the financial stability of the countries that lend money to the United States that count on the revenue that they get from the interest payments from the United States. That's what's at stake here. And it's important that people understand that. So I'm glad we got that soundbite in there. It's really important that you as the public call your federal legislators, your senator, your House of Representatives, people at your Commerce Department, if that's what you have in your state, and tell them that whatever it is that you all are doing, by the time we get to the end of May or June of this year, you need to have already put in place legislation that ensures that all U.S. bills are paid on time, every single time. If you don't do that, then we're going to have some real issues here in the United States. And I mean ugly issues. If you thought that the Tennessee protests were ugly, this should be even uglier, much more ugly than that. So it's really important. Let me talk a little bit about preemption. As the result of a concerted lobbying campaign by the National Rifle Association, more than 40 states, I think it's 42 states in this country, have passed broad firearm preemption laws that specifically prohibit local governments from adopting reasonable gun laws tailored to local conditions. These laws prevent local mayors and police chiefs, the officials who are most familiar with local criminal activity and how to address it. It prohibits them from passing common sense public safety measures designed to keep their communities safe. Now, what does that mean? You may have a state law that says that you have to use water that's gone through the we have a water treatment facility, for water. The Buffalo Water Authority has a treatment facility so that the water that you drink that comes out of your faucet has gone through a cleansing process to strip it of any harmful chemicals that could hurt you if you were to drink that water. Now, there's a state law that says that you can only have running in your taps drinkable water. But local communities can have more stringent laws. They can't have a law that makes it less stringent, but they can have laws that make water safety more stringent. Does that make sense the way I said that, Willie?
Mm-hmm.
So the reason for that is in different communities, you have different realities. So let's suppose that you have a rural community and there's a high concentration of soil that has sulfur in it, soil that has, maybe metal contamination, in it. You may have ordinances in that rural community that are more stringent than the ordinances that you may have in, say, Buffalo, where all of your water is going to go through the Buffalo Water Authority before it gets to the taps inside the houses of Buffalo residents. You know that the water has gone through that process. So as long as the Water Authority is doing their job correctly, you don't have to have any more stringent requirements on water safety in Buffalo. But you may need to have that in a more rural community. So apply that to the gun laws. You may have gun laws that say that only certain people at certain ages, under certain circumstances, can have a gun in public. But we know that if you're in a rural community, the likelihood that you're going to have a face-to-face confrontation with somebody, who's walking around outside in a rural community is unlikely because there aren't that many people that you're going to be walking by. It's a rural community. But if you're in the city of Buffalo and there's 500 people on a block, the likelihood that you're going to walk by somebody is much more common. And if there are frictions between people, the likelihood that those frictions can result in conflict, a violent conflict, is much more heightened. So you may have much more stringent laws in the city of Buffalo restricting the terms under which people can own weapons and how those weapons are to be kept. You may have more stringent laws in that Buffalo community than you might have in that rural community because the circumstances, are different in those communities. That's what the purpose of local legislation is all about. See, the federal government sets laws that are sort of standard for the country as a whole. Each state passes laws that govern how people in your state live underneath those federal laws. Then each county has the authority to be able to create legislation on how you implement the federal laws that are tailored or shaped for implementation by state laws in your county. How do we implement those things in our county? How do we implement those things in our city, in our villages, in our towns, and so on? That's what the whole hierarchy of democracy and the structure of our government is about. So preemption is taking away the authority of people in particular circumstances who have reasons why they want to implement rules and regulations in a different way than they're authorized by the federal government or by the state government or by the county government, for that matter. People that have a different way that they want to do it for particular reasons, in their area, they should be allowed to be able to do that. That's what local rule is supposed to be about. But what the National Rifle Association did was organize a lot of money. Remember I told you about, when you put $500,000 in somebody's hands, how hard it is for you to ignore that money? You have to think about that $500,000 donation, or let's say it's a $50,000 donation, to your council race or to your state legislator or legislator race or your county legislator race. Think about how many chicken dinners you got to sell to be able to generate $50,000 in profit. If you're looking at that kind of logistics, the likelihood that you're going to turn down that $50,000 is slim and none, because it's going to be hard for you to generate that money in a different way. The state firearm preemption laws override common sense by limiting cities that are racked with gun violence to the identical laws that apply in rural areas where responsible gun ownership is more embedded in daily life. In rural areas, people often hunt to eat. Mm-hmm. In rural areas, people you're more exposed. So if somebody is a predator and you're out there, in the sticks by yourself fishing, having a gun tends to make predators say, I'm going to pass by that person, not bother them, and go another way. But if you don't have a gun and the predator has a gun, they're going to feel more empowered to do something to you if that's what's on their mind, whether they're mentally ill or I'm sick of hearing the mentally ill stuff. The point I'm trying to get people to understand is that we have a gun ideation in this country, not a mental health ideation in this country. We have a gun ideation in this country, and we have to somehow defeat that gun ideation. But the preemption issue is state firearm preemption laws override what clearly is common sense in limiting cities that are racked with gun violence to the identical laws that apply in rural areas where responsible gun ownership is more embedded in their lives. So, if you live on a block where 1,000 people live on your block, there's a lot more potential for friction. So the things you need to do to reduce the potential bad outcomes of that friction, you should do that. And that's what you use local regulation to accomplish. If you live in an area where in a 1 square mile area, there's like 5 people that live in that area, you don't really need that much protection from gun violence, because there just aren't that many people that are in that kind of close relationship where that kind of friction is likely to occur. Preemption laws are associated with increased rates of gun trafficking. That's what tends to happen. If you if you limit the access, the legal access to guns, then there's always somebody who's trying to make money. And so if you deny me my normal way of getting access to something that I want, then I'm going to find an alternative way, often an illegal way, for me to get access to something that I want. So that's what that trafficking thing is about. But preemption laws also lead to dangerous and illogical results, such as allowing a city to keep knives and to keep knives out of parks and keep keep knives out of parks, out of recreation centers, and out of city halls, right, but forcing the same city to allow guns in churches and in public squares, and so on. Mm-hmm. That's irrational. So I understand the reason for people having the ability to own guns. The preemption laws actually make it more difficult for people to have guns in their local areas, because you can't enforce the state law in that local area in a way that conforms to the resources and the logistics and the needs of that local area. From the earliest days of the United States, communities adopted a wide range of gun laws tailored to local conditions, with generally stronger gun laws in densely populated cities that have greater potential for violent crime, and fewer regulations in less crowded rural areas. Now, I suspect that people who are living in densely populated urban areas may feel differently about this paradigm that I've just described, that may result in rural and suburban residents having a much higher rate of gun ownership and access to guns than residents who live in densely populated urban areas. And that's going to take on kind of a racial, a characteristic. If you end up denying 60 or 70% of African people who live in cities the ability to access ownership of a gun, and you don't do that, only 5% of the people that live in rural areas are denied access, to owning a gun.
Right.
There's going to be an unfairness, perception of that.
Right.
And I understand that.
Right.
My point is that, okay, we accept that it's unfair, but what is the alternative? What's a more rational way for us to go? Is the rational way is to let everybody strap up, which is what the National Rifle Association wants? Let everybody, get 20 or 30, guns apiece. There are 331 or maybe more than that, 335 million people who live in the United States right now. Something like 420 million guns are in the private possession of individual Americans' hands.
Right.
So if we go to a model where everybody has a gun, my understanding is only a third of Americans have a gun. So that means there's another 200 million Americans who could have a gun. Do you think we would be better off if we had 335 million Americans walking around with guns strapped to their waist and so on? Would that be a safer situation for us?
No, I don't think that would be a safer. You'll just have more people have accidents with guns, and then also be using them when they get maybe angry or all types of things. So
I mean, trust me when I tell you this: if you own a gun, within 4 or 5 microseconds of the time that you bought that gun, that gun is going to become an extension of your arm, an extension of your wrist,
right,
an extension of your hand.
Right.
When something comes at you that you think will compromise you.
Right.
You will go to whatever is within the reach of your hand. You will go to that gun immediately.
Right.
So we need to understand that if the alternative to the a fair distribution of guns across the population, if the one alternative is to give everybody a gun, that's what they do in Switzerland. Everybody gets a gun. That's one way to go.
Okay.
But you have to ask yourself, is that a good way to go?
Right.
Or will that create more chaos rather than less? Or the other way would be for you to reduce, if not eliminate, the number of guns that are walking around in the streets. I don't have a problem with a gun that's walking around inside of a library, at a rifle range where they got a little lockbox there, that's got, a number on it, and I got a key to the lockbox.
Right.
I don't have a problem with the gun that's in there. I don't have a problem with the gun that's in a safe, in your house, behind the bed in the master bedroom, right? That gun's not walking around. I don't have a problem with that. I got a problem with the guns that are walking around in your sleeve, that are walking around in your vest pocket,
right,
that are walking around strapped to your waist, that are in your coat, right? That are walking up and down the street with you. I got a problem with that gun, right? And so how do we address that? Now, I'm giving you my personal opinion. I'm not giving you law. That's my personal opinion, that it would be unsuccessful in my mind for us to get everybody to give up their guns, completely. I don't think that that's a rational way to go. I think that if we could get everybody to accept regulation on having guns on your possession, having guns walking around in the street, having guns secured, having everybody trained on how to use a gun, having everybody evaluated in terms of their ability to their stability and the likelihood that they might use a weapon irrationally and so on. Those seem to me to be the priority ways that we should go to try to address this issue. Now, I got this from research. The listener on Wednesday talked about the Everytown Gun for Safety report, and I went to that report and pulled down this information. I went to another website by the Jocelyn Law Firm that talks about homicides are overwhelmingly. This is important for you to understand, because remember, everything is, well, how should I say this the right way? You can look at the same thing, but depending on where you are in relation to the thing you're looking at, you may perceive the same thing in different ways. I may look at a gun and see it as safety.
Right.
You may look at a gun and see it as a threat, because your experience, with people having guns on their possession is maybe different than mine. So your perception of the gun may be different. But here's what this report from the Jocelyn Law Firm spoke about. It says that the homicides are overwhelmingly committed using handguns. They were found to be the most common murder weapon for nearly half of all homicides in the United States in 2019. Now, I need for you to understand that half of all homicides in the United States are suicides. So this report is talking about the half of homicides in the United States that are not suicides, that are people killing other people on purpose. Assault weapons, primarily assault-type rifles, account for somewhere around, on average, 7% of the homicides in which a gun was used to commit the homicide. Of the almost 14,000 homicides in 2019, a little over 10,500 of those homicides were committed using a firearm. But here's the important thing, Willie. Of those 10,508 homicides that were committed in 2019 using a firearm, only 364 of those homicides were used a rifle.
Wow.
All the rest of those homicides used a gun, a handgun. So if we wiped out all of the assault weapons homicides in the United States completely for the year, we'd be knocking out 364 homicides out of 10,505, 508 homicides. So we'd be knocking out about 6 or 7% of the homicides and leaving the other 93, 94% in place.
We really haven't made a dent in solving the situation.
Right. Now, please hear me when I say this. I am not advocating that we should say, okay, well, let's let assault rifles go. Let's get out of the way and let people have, assault rifles. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we should do everything we can to control and eliminate homicides that use a assault rifle. Absolutely. But that's not going to solve our problem. To solve our larger problem, we have to solve the problem of gun homicides, period, across the board. And that means that 93, 94% of those gun homicides are committed using a firearm. I haven't even talked about the homicides, Willie, that are committed using your hands, using your feet, using a stick, using a knife, because there are more homicides that are committed using those tactics than there are homicides that use a gun.
Oh, wow. You know how many more?
I didn't pull this down, but trust me when I tell you this, based on this report, that you are more likely to be murdered by somebody using something other than a gun than you are likely to be murdered by somebody using a gun.
Is it double?
I think if there's 14,000 homicides in the United States, the portion of the 10,508 Now, I'm not reading this report right. I don't have the right data, so let me not give you that number.
Gotcha.
But the important number is that more people are killed with people using their hands, wringing people's necks, punching people, throwing people off of bridges. I mean, can I just say that we're a violent people? I mean, we need governance. We need guardian angels around us, So.
Well, it seems that way, especially when you compare us with other nations and, how many guns they have and how many killings. And it does seem like we're very violent here.
Yeah, we definitely have issues. So my point is that somehow we have to get guns off the street. The only way to balance the fears of all Americans about gun violence is to reduce the number of guns easily accessible to residents and to change the culture in the United States that sees guns as the most secure way to ensure persons' personal safety. For example, if instead of seducing people into giving up their guns, it might be better to require people to secure their guns. When they're not on the firing range or hunting or everyone must be required to store their weapons in a safe or a lockbox or at a gun storage facility. But you should not be permitted without serious consequence to be walking around the street, with a gun. Now, this is going to contradict, a lot of the gun laws that have been passed in states around this country where you can take a gun to church, you can take a gun to school, and so on. I tried to speak to this when we talked about this just a little bit on Wednesday. Let me just express this again. The likelihood that when somebody is confronting you or a home invasion is occurring or somebody just wants to be ugly with you on the street, the likelihood that you're going to be in a position to unstrap your weapon, get it out, aim it, and fire it at whoever the person or persons are that are threatening you, the likelihood that you're going to have that gun out in the right position to be able to use it that way is very slim. If somebody breaks in your house, do you have the gun under your pillow? And even if you do, if you're asleep, that's really not going to help you. If somebody breaks into your house and you're not there, what good does the gun do you if you're not there when somebody breaks into your house? If somebody is confronting you on the street, are we going to have Wild Bill Hickok and, Wyatt Earp type stuff? We're going to have shootouts in the middle of the street. We have to ask ourselves better questions. The likelihood is that you're not going to be in a position to use that gun at the point that the threat to you occurs. So if you're not likely to be able to use that gun when that threat occurs, what point is being served for you having the gun in the first place? Now, if your ideation is, well, it could be that the people who live on the west side have ganged up and they've decided they're going to try to invade the people on the east side and take away half of the east side's land. If we had that kind of a situation, then the west side people would muscle up with their guns and the east side people would muscle up with their guns, and you'd have essentially a local militia confrontation, between those two communities of people. But that's not the way gun violence occurs. That's not the threat that we're dealing with, as a country. This idea that we have to be prepared to go to war with the government of the United States is just stupid. That's not the threat. That's not the issue that threatens us. Where do most gun threats come from? People having guns, having conflicts with other people, and using their guns to solve the conflicts that they have with other people. We had a child, was it at McKinley High School, Willie, that he was shot. He didn't die,
right,
but he was shot because a conflict occurred where you had several kids chasing the kid who got shot. So it wasn't even as if the people who were doing the shooting were afraid for their lives from the person who they were shooting at. The person that they were shooting at was the person who was unarmed. The person who was doing the shooting was the person who was armed. So I just want to give us that picture. We'll talk a little bit more about this on the other side of the break. Then I want to get into a couple other subjects. So if you all stick with us, we will see you on the other side of the break here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM WBNY. See you all then.
FM WBNY is proud to present Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman.
Welcome to Democracy Now!
Award-winning investigative journalism.
Is the NRA imploding?
Providing relevant analysis that makes you think.
Secret State Department documents, including evidence of U.S. war crimes.
Fact-finding reports you will not hear elsewhere. Democracy Now! Airs Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. on 91.3 FM, WBNY, Buffalo. Ready for radio that's challenging, innovative, and encouraging? Tune in, Living for the People.
This is L. Nathan Hare. Join me right here, 91.3 FM WBNY. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. after Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! We'll provide objective analysis regarding current issues. Call 878-5104. It's Living for the People on 91.3 FM WBNY. That was all right, Willie. I like hearing that commercial. Listen, it's time for you all to call in and give us your thoughts about this preemption, this ability that the National Rifle Association has lobbied to get accomplished, where local communities are being prevented from regulating gun ownership and gun use in their local area. So whatever your thoughts are about that, I think it's important for us to hear what you think. So put your thoughts on the table. The number here again is 716-878-5104. That's 716-878-5104. From the, as indicated, from the earliest days of the Republic, communities adopted a wide range of gun laws tailored to local conditions, with generally stronger laws in densely populated cities that have greater potential for violent crime and fewer regulations in less crowded rural areas. Cities like Philadelphia, New York, and Boston had extensive laws on gunpowder and gun use dating to the colonial era. And throughout the 19th century, state legislators expressly granted newly incorporated cities the power to enact such laws. As the country expanded, Wild West cities like Dodge City, Tombstone, and others adopted strong firearm regulations. Many banned firearms altogether within the city limits, requiring visitors from frontier areas where gun possession and use was widespread to leave their firearms with law enforcement in the city, within the city limits, or at the city limits. I want you to understand what this is talking about. You actually, for those of you that are a little older, remember the old Westerns, you recall that a sheriff in a town, when a newcomer came along, could ask the newcomer if he had a gun. If the newcomer said that he did, the sheriff would say, well, you can't have the gun in the city. So we've got a space over here in the whatever the sheriff's office building is. We got a facility over here, right, and we'll store your gun in that facility. And when you leave, you can take your gun with you. That used to be the way it was in the old days. But now we have people flying in and out of cities, migrating across borders, and people have every kind of weapon you can think of. And this is the problem that we have to find a way to solve. Throughout the nation's history, local communities faced few or no obstacles to enacting locally tailored laws, gun laws. Indeed, prior to 1980, only a handful of states had any form of firearm preemption laws at all. But consistent with the tradition of local gun laws, in 1981, Morton Grove, Illinois, adopted an ordinance that prohibited the possession of handguns. But this sparked a backlash from the gun lobby and the National Rifle Association. This was the year of Ronald Reagan, the first year of Ronald Reagan's first term in office. The NRA launched a concerted effort to persuade state legislators to bar municipalities from enacting gun laws. The NRA's campaign succeeded, And today, 42 states have broad firearm preemption laws. In fact, only California, Connecticut, Hawaii, Illinois, Massachusetts, Nebraska, New Jersey, and New York State generally allow local officials to pass firearms-related public safety laws. And in fact, even that doesn't work because we had the SAFE Act passed 4 or 5 years ago in New York State, and we have county sheriffs who say, and the one who was the county sheriff here before Garcia, who said, I'm not enforcing the SAFE Act because I don't agree with it.
Wow.
How can you be an elected official, a part of the government passes laws, you're a part of that government, you ran for office to become an officer of that government, and then you say you won't enforce the law of the government that you ran for office to be an office holder in?
Well, I guess their constituents want their guns. So,
yeah, we need new constituents. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. That's wrong. The gun lobby's preemption campaign aims not only to tie the hands of local officials, but it aims to intimidate and punish those who attempt to reduce gun violence through local law. When I read this, it reminds me of the Texas law that says that if a woman wants to have an abortion and she gets counsel from somebody, or she gets a cab ride from somebody, or her friend accompanies her, to the appointment to go learn about what to do with regard to an abortion, that the person, not the woman, but the people who enabled the woman can be arrested. In fact, somebody who's not one of those people, a person could have heard. I was in school and I heard that Sandy, was helping Tasha learn about how to get an abortion, and that person who said that could actually go to the local law enforcement and say this person was trying to help this person get an abortion, and get $10,000 as a bounty.
Wow.
How is that even constitutional, right? I mean, it may be. I may not understand the Constitution well enough to give a lawyer's opinion on it, but it doesn't sound constitutional to me.
Mm-hmm.
But the most sweeping firearm preemption laws contain onerous, punitive provisions designed to intimidate city officials from even attempting to address gun violence. My own personal opinion is that we must make it onerous for people to have guns exposed and or accessible except under specified conditions. Do you remember the case, Willie, it wasn't too long ago, I don't even know if it's a month ago, maybe it was a month ago, the 6-year-old boy that got a gun from his mother's house and went to school. He had an issue with somebody at school. Wow. You frowned at me. I spilled some paste and you didn't pick it up for me. You made me cut the paper this way rather than that way. I don't know what this 6-year-old, what is on a 6-year-old's mind. Right. But this 6-year-old was walking around the school with an attitude.
Wow.
I mean, it wasn't like this was something that happened spur of the moment. This child was walking around the school with an attitude. He exposed to other people that he had a gun. That child, okay, this is the reason why you can't have guns accessible to people. The mother in this household, she's been charged with not having the gun secured.
Right.
But the culture that she lived in that made her feel that it was necessary for her to have a gun in the first place and to have the gun where her child knew she had the gun, that culture is what we have to find a way to correct.
Right.
We've got to teach people, acculturate people to think about themselves differently. We must constantly teach against the ideation of using a gun to resolve conflict. Switzerland, and I'm going to get to another subject, but let me just quickly, Switzerland hasn't had a mass shooting since 2001.
Wow, 2001.
Now, there's only 2 or 3 million people that live in Switzerland. I mean, 8 people live in the country. They all live in a closet. But they don't in that closet, they're not running around shooting each other. Right.
Well, it sounds like to me too, Mr. Hare, is that the more people you have, the more problems you're going to have too. So.
And the closer they are together, the more risk we are having of conflicts that lead to homicides. So the country, Switzerland, has, it says 2 million people. No, I'm sorry. It says it has 2 million privately owned guns in a nation of 8.3 million people.
Okay.
In 2016, the country had a total of 47 attempted homicides with firearms. Out of 8.3 million people, in 2016, they had 47 attempted homicides with firearms. They said the country's overall murder rate was almost zero.
Wow, unbelievable.
Now, the National Rifle Association points to Switzerland as an example of this is why you don't need any, rules on gun ownership. Everybody in Switzerland has a gun,
right?
So they got the lowest murder rates in the world. But the Swiss have also some of the most specific rules and regulations for gun use. Insider Magazine took a look at the country's past with guns to see why it had lower rates of gun violence than the U.S., where a mass shooting had just killed 6 people in Nashville, Tennessee. As you all know, we learned that gun deaths are the leading cause of death for children and adolescents in this country. Think about that for a second. The leading cause of death for a person aged 0 to 17 in the United States is homicide.
Mm-hmm.
How can we live with that? How can we walk around here acting like we're the exemplars of the exceptionalism, in world cultures, and the number one cause of death for our kids is murder?
Right.
That just cannot be. Swiss authorities decide on a local level whether to give people gun permits. They keep a log of everyone who owns a gun in their region, which is known as a canton. Though hunting rifles and semi-automatic long arms are exempt from the permit requirement. Cantonal police don't take their duty doling out gun licenses lightly. They might consult a psychiatrist or talk to authorities in other cantons to find out the background of somebody who wants to buy a gun. Does this person do they kill frogs? Do they take cats and pull their legs out, to see if it hurts? They got people that do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a person that has that kind of ideation, you don't give them a gun. I mean, obviously there's something imbalanced about that person. Swiss laws are designed to prevent anyone who's violent or incompetent from owning a gun. People who've been convicted of a crime or have an alcohol or drug addiction problem are not allowed to buy guns in Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
Their law also states that anyone who expresses a violent or dangerous attitude will not be permitted to own a gun. Gun owners who want to carry their weapon for defensive purposes also have to prove that they can properly load, properly unload, properly shoot their weapon. They must pass a test to get a license. And interestingly enough, Switzerland is one of the 5 or 6 happiest countries in the world.
Mm.
We're supposed to be the template, for how everybody ought to live.
Right.
United States, follow us, but we're not in the top 6.
Right. So, well, we probably need to really study Switzerland and see. But I know part of it is our population is much bigger too. So I know that's a part of it.
So in the people that were doing the research, they said one of the things that explains what's going on in the United States is declining social support and increased corruption. That's people assessing us. That's not us assessing somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That's other people assessing the United States. That what is driving the rate of homicides that we see in this country is what they refer to as declining social support. The child care tax credit, being eliminated.
Right.
All those supports that were set up to help people through the pandemic.
Wow.
All those things are expiring, and people are being thrown off of those support systems.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems to be a lot of it. And corruption. And corruption is Donald Trump. That kind of corruption, in our government.
Mm-hmm.
So That's enough. I just wanted to give us, some understanding of that. I was going to tell you about Japan. Let me just tell you quickly, there's 125 million people live in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
They have not had a murder in 49 years.
You're kidding me.
They've not had one murder in 49 years.
So it's not population. So my theory is wrong.
Right.
Oh, my God.
Now, I know there was either a president or a former president in Japan who was killed. I'm not sure what year it was that he was killed, but it revolutionized Japan's attitude about gun violence.
Mm-hmm.
And so they passed all kinds of laws that are much stricter even to the laws that Switzerland has about people's ability to possess a gun.
Now, do you know how many guns that they have in there?
I didn't count up how many guns they had, but only 11% of the people, the adults in Japan, own a gun.
Oh, okay. So a small percentage.
So it's quite small.
Mm-hmm.
So we only got about 10 minutes left. Let me just talk a little bit about your cousin. I know that you all are, brothers of the same lodge and whatnot. Y'all went to school together.
Mm-hmm.
Donald J. Trump.
Mm-hmm.
His polling, remember they kept telling us, Willie, all last week, the week before last, well, they indict Donald Trump.
Right.
His poll numbers are going to go up. He's going to be like the hero,
right.
To that cast of characters that are supporters of Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Go, Donald. Those people are trying to pick on you. We're on your side. That's what we were told, right?
Right.
That's not what the polls say. According to a new ABC News Ipsos poll released last week, half of Americans, roughly 53% of Americans, believe that Trump intentionally did something illegal in this case where Letitia James, where Alvin Bragg, the district attorney for Manhattan, where he's being charged with 34 felony counts of violation of record-keeping laws, fraud, and what is the other word? I don't want to say mislabeling because that makes it sound trivial, but changing the characteristic of or the labeling of a record from something that is visible as a personal expense to you to something that is less visible, that is a expense of your business. And not only does it hide the transaction so that you don't realize that transaction was made to further a political objective, but it also makes the transaction tax deductible. So you don't pay taxes on the money that you spent, for something personal. Or more than a week after Donald Trump's arrest, it appears that this idea that his support is going to increase is not turning out to be the case at all. The number of those who believe that Trump did nothing wrong is roughly 20% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
Furthermore, the report found that independents and people who were undecided on this issue look to be moving away from Donald Trump by small margins. But if roughly 80% of the people think that Donald Trump is a criminal, it's likely that their view of his suitability to serve as president has definitely taken a hit. Trump's polling drops post-indictment. While there was speculation that getting arrested and indicted would help Donald Trump politically, the new polling says that his approval rating has dropped significantly. Did you have a caller hang on there?
Yeah, we got a caller.
Let me grab that call real quick. Hi, caller, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing there, Mr. Hare?
I'm doing great.
Anyway, there was the assassination, I'm so sorry to say, and I do really love Japan so much. My son, for instance, wants to move there.
Uh-huh.
But Shinzo
Abe, that's who it was, yeah.
He was assassinated on July 8th of 2022. He was shot from behind at close range by a man with a homemade firearm.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's just unfortunate. But, I'm looking at a list of violent crimes, and, there's arson, there's not a whole lot. There's some stabbings, but, Japan has for a long time been a world leader in not having any guns in their country.
Right.
So, it's sad we can't get there. Yesterday, I think there was a editorial, I'll send you the link, of a African American man who said why he, feels he has to carry an AR-15. I think his last name is Watson was the man.
Uh-huh.
He said because he sees it as white nationalist protection. That because there's so many white.
I hear that all the time.
And it's real unfortunate, but and apparently there's going to be a conference at Buffalo State on having conversations, and maybe you could get a guest from it. I think it's the family of one of the people that was murdered in that horrendous attack at Tops.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you could get somebody from the family to talk about what they're trying to accomplish, because that article that Mr. Watson wrote also references it. So I just want to thank you for the wonderful programming that you always offer.
Thank you, Kat. I really appreciate your comments.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Excellent.
Bye.
Excellent. Yeah, I got to pull that up and see when that's going to be. But that's really focusing on the very thing that we're talking about right now. And I guess what I'm trying to get people to understand is if you keep driving further down the road that you're on, you're going to see and experience more of what you've already seen. If you want to experience something less, you got to get on a different road. There was a time when we were tightly regulating the amount of guns that were in the hands of people in local communities. You had to be outside of local urban communities in wide open spaces for you to have access or the ability to be using guns for hunting or whatever, your purpose was. When we got off that road, because the National Rifle Association began to pay our, legislators, and we got off that road, we got onto a new road. And as we kept barreling down that new road, things started to occur. Wow, people are getting shot in school. Wow, people are getting shot at the shopping malls. Wow, people are getting shot at the nightclubs. Wow, people are getting shot all over the place. That's because you're on the wrong road. What you got to do if you don't want this to happen is get off this road. Get onto a road where people aren't getting shot. We have to change how we allow ourselves to think about ourselves as a community of people if we're going to get this done. But let me just go back to Donald Trump real quick. He was charged in his 34-count indictment. And I just wanted people to understand this was because he falsified corporate records in furtherance of paying this hush money to this Stormy Daniels woman. And he did that only because he wanted to keep the noise down prior to the election in that would have been in November of 2016. So once we got past the election, he didn't seem to care too much about, keeping the fear down. She was running her mouth about her accusations and whatnot. He was saying all kinds of ugly things about her, but he didn't seem to care about it, at that point because he'd already won the office. So the only reason why he was trying to suppress this information was he didn't want it to come out until after the election so that he could continue to get the support that he was getting prior to the election. This was also during the same period that the Hollywood Access, I think they call it, tape, where he talked about sticking his tongue down, a woman's throat, and grabbing her by her private parts. Just abominable stuff, right? And so he didn't want to have more of that stuff, percolating in that week before the election because it was a close election. And if he lost, like 0.25% of public support, that would have been the difference between him winning the election and not winning the election. And even then, he didn't win the popular vote. He only won the Electoral College vote. So all of that is important. So Trump is in New York City today and yesterday because he's under an order to testify in a civil lawsuit against him for his misrepresenting records indicating that a property was valued at 3 times what it actually should have been valued at in order for him to be able to get that property used as leverage or collateral for a loan. And then when he's paying his taxes, the property wound up being valued at like half of what it was or a third of what it was in order for him to be able to not have to pay taxes on the capital gains on that that property. I mean, Donald Trump just does a lot. I'm just talking about one thing. He apparently has done hundreds of these things over the course of the year. He's also under another civil proceeding by I think her name is E. Jean Carroll, because she has indicated that he literally raped her at a department store. Who does that? Trump. Who does that?
Wow.
You walk into a department store, you're near the women's section, the lady's near the dressing room, she's a staff person, a salesperson, and you walk up to her and you grin at her, she grins at you, show me the operation. She lets you see what the dressing room looks like, I don't know where this actually took place, but you go from that interaction to you pulling this woman's, clothes off or however you did this, and this turning into a rape allegation. Now that's what she said occurred. I wasn't there, so I can't tell you what actually did occur, but that's what she's alleging occurred. So that's on the table. Last note, Alvin Bragg's lawsuit shows clear evidence that Jim Jordan and Trump threatened prosecutors. This is in the Raw Story website. Matthew Chapman is the author. In response to efforts by House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan to investigate whether the Trump indictment in New York was legitimate, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg has filed a countersuit against Jordan, alleging improper attempts to intimidate prosecutors from doing their jobs. When have you ever heard of an oversight committee of the House or the Senate going into a local state prosecution and trying to investigate the state prosecutors who are investigating a state crime? How does the federal government's or the House of Representatives or the Senate's oversight committees, how do those committees have any jurisdiction, any standing over a state prosecutor investigating and prosecuting a state crime? How does Jim Jordan even have standing, for something like that? So what he's saying is, well, I'm not investigating that. I'm investigating whether or not the reasons why you started the investigation against Donald Trump were valid reasons. Does that make any sense? But that's what we see going on right now. The article says this is all unusual. It has, according to legal analyst Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, she told CNN that the lawsuit being brought by Alvin Bragg has lots of evidence to back it up. Although she says the whole thing is unprecedented, a sitting member of Congress trying to sort of maneuver his way through this thing, Representative Jim Jordan is trying to say, yes, it's because of this is how he got standing. I didn't have this in my memory, but this is how Jim Jordan says he got standing. He says the federal government gives $5,000 to the office of the district attorney of Manhattan. Now that $5,000 probably represents about 1/14 of a second of the budget of the Manhattan district office. You gave $5,000 in grant money to that office, and that gives you the right to inspect the investigations that are conducted by the district attorney for that office. That doesn't make an ounce of sense. So that's what's really going on. Bragg sets out with, including all the tweets by the former president as well as Jim Jordan, including the photo of the baseball bat near Alvin Bragg's head, the racial slurs and the dog whistles, that as a result of this campaign of intimidation by Jim Jordan and others that Trump has been coordinating, Alvin Bragg has gotten over 1,000 threats since that time, including getting a white powder and so on. So the lawyers think that Alvin Bragg has made a really good case against Jim Jordan, and the likelihood is that the oversight committee is going to be prevented from continuing to try to intimidate Alvin Bragg's investigation. Thank you all for supporting us. We got a lot of stuff that's on our plate. We got a long weekend. Please be safe over the course of this weekend. There's nothing illegal about driving safely. Even if you don't have New York State local laws that tell you to drive safer than you have to drive under state law, drive safely anyway. Look forward to talk to you all on Monday here at Living for the People at 91.3 FM, WBNY. We'll see you all then.
We've been lost for too long now. We've been lost for too long. Let's do it right.